All right, so there's probably a notice up on your screen too that this part of the presentation, that our webinar today is being recorded. So we're gonna do about a half an hour of presentation based on these slides, and then the remainder of the time is left for question and answers. And we're at your service. We will stay as long as there are questions on this call. So if we could move to the first slide, please. So just a few meeting reminders. I'm your host today, Luisa Valiela. I work in the Water Division and run the San Francisco Bay program. We are holding this webinar on our Teams platform. Just a reminder to please keep yourself muted. Then again, we will run through our slides, but have plenty of time for questions and answers and interactions after the presentation part. If you are interested in following along with closed captions, along the top bar of your screen on Teams, there are 3 dots with the title More, and if you click on that, there's a drop-down menu that has a language setting, and you can click there to start closed captioning if that is of interest to you. As I mentioned, we'll do Q&A at the end, but feel free to, if questions occur to you as we proceed through the slides and you want to just use it as a way to remember your question, feel free to use the chat as a way to keep track, and we will be monitoring that and circling back to that. The chat function you can open also as part of your menu bar at the top of your screen. And as I mentioned, we are recording this, and all questions that aren't already on our frequently asked questions part of our website that we log on today will be posted to our website post presentation. Next slide, please. So definitely want to cover these main points, but again, plenty of time for questions if we cover or don't cover things that you're particularly interested in understanding as part of our open request for applications. So this is year 2 of the BIL San Francisco Bay Water Quality Improvement Fund, and BIL is the bipartisan infrastructure law. So additional funding that we're getting from Congress to put federal funds into the hands of underserved communities, addressing their needs in the clean water and climate resilience sphere. One of the things that we will definitely touch on is how to be as prepared as possible for submitting your application, and that includes registering your organization on sam.gov, where you get a UEI, a particular number. So we'll definitely walk through that. There was a lot, again, this is year 2. There was a lot of lessons learned in year 1 of BIL, that being one of them. We'll go over the evaluation criteria that are in the request for applications and go through a non-exhaustive list of project types. We will do some overview of forms. We are the federal government. We do require a lot of forms as part of your application. So we'll do some highlights on trying to get the forms filled out correctly. And then we'll provide a slide that gives you other dates and times that our team will be available for providing support for the application process and the submittal process. And we call those drop-in Q&As, and those will be happening in June. Next slide. So a little bit of grounding of where we are in our San Francisco Bay Water Quality Improvement Fund as a program. We have been in existence since 2008, and for a very long time, as this graph shows, we had very steady funding at about $5 million a year to give out in grants for water quality and wetlands restoration. You'll see the uptick in 2022. That was both the year that we got BIL funding as an augmentation of our program, and then our program was augmented also through appropriations from Congress. So you will see that definitely it looks different, and it has meant a growth of our program as well in terms of staffing and providing more support for the types of grantees, especially that are expected. The federal government is expected to do a better job, a growing learning space of building trust and support with underserved communities. We did begin in 2016 with an emphasis on reaching out to hear what types of projects underserved communities needed. So that is the hashed portion of the bar chart to indicate, that this is a work in progress, and we are committed to continuing to improve our ability to support those underserved communities and their needs in the clean water space. Next slide. So as I mentioned, BIL, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, when it was passed, it was very intentionally combined with the Biden administration's executive order on environmental justice. And so we were able to expand our program, our San Francisco Bay program, with the BIL funding. So this approximately $5 million a year between the years of 2022 and 2026. BIL was passed as a 5-year spending plan to build this regional resilience in underserved communities. We will get into kind of what that means when we talk about the project types. Next slide. So this list, again, a non-exhaustive list, but provides examples of what we have in our request for applications to both describe what we think might be of interest to certain communities and community-based organizations that are working in environmental justice spaces. But it also is reflective of some of the grants that we are funding as of last year, FY22. So it's a mix. We certainly are continuing our work in green stormwater infrastructure, making sure that underserved communities get that type of upgrade in their stormwater management infrastructure. We are very interested and glad to be supporting some work that community-based organizations are interested in understanding what the levels of contamination are in fish in the bay that are caught by a variety of different communities, culturally and subsistence fishing communities. There has also been an interest in understanding water contamination in specific watersheds. That can include a nearshore area, or for instance, groundwater is kind of a new space we might be moving into, sampling groundwater that is in a nearshore condition, so subject to starting to move based on sea level rise pressure, again, in the nearshore area. I would want to clarify that when we talk about water contamination, we're talking about surface waters, not drinking water. Our program is a Clean Water Act funded program, so we don't necessarily fund work that is focused on safety in drinking water. We're very interested in multiple communities' involvement in planning for shoreline resilience. There are a lot of expectations about improving the process by which flood protection or sea level rise shoreline projects are planned, and ensuring that the communities that are affected get a voice in how those are planned and designed. Wetlands restoration and trash work, again, very a staple of our program, but often there needs to be more attention and more dedication to ensuring that those types of projects happen in underserved communities. Next slide. So some nuts and bolts. So what is the UEI? One of our great government acronyms, the unique entity identifier, and what we've come to learn as being partners with our grantees last year is that your entity to receive federal funds needs to be registered with sam.gov. It is one thing to have a UEI, and your organization may very well already have a UEI as part of being a funding partner for other projects in the past. But if your organization in and of itself has not gone through the process of registering with sam.gov, it's essentially the next level of having a UEI. That is the key component of successfully both applying to grants.gov and being able to receive federal funds should you be selected for funding. So SAM.gov is a federal platform. It takes a while to fully go through the process of registering on SAM.gov. So these are reminders to actually start that process now. Find out if you already have a UEI, find out if it's the right level, as in having registered with SAM.gov, not just have a UEI that's a alphanumeric number, but is not essentially registered, and also make sure that it is current. So you may have done it in the past, but they do lapse. And so a current registration with SAM.gov resulting in a UEI is what we need to get all of our prospective applicants to successfully be able to submit their application on grants.gov. I'm sure we'll end up with some needing to revisit this later in the Q&A. So feel free to ask questions about that. We have been looking into what is useful for kind of understanding how to navigate SAM.gov, and SAM.gov actually has a tutorial that by video, like a YouTube video, which is worth watching and helpful. So we will post those resources both on our website and in the chat so that you have that readily. Next slide. This is an overview of some basics related to the request for applications. So all important, our grant opportunity number, you see that at the top. When you register or go to grants.gov to submit your application, you have to make sure you're submitting under the right program opportunity number. So that's what that is. A reiteration again that we have approximately $5 million available this year, as that will be the case for every year. So we're in year 2 of BIL. Years 3, 4, and 5 will also be for approximately the same amount of funding. Our funding range is pretty broad, between 200K and $1 million, and that really just reflects that different projects have different needs. We're interested in any range, and those are not exact numbers. If you submit for 198K or $1,000,001, totally fine. It should be what makes sense for your project and what you're hoping to achieve. So we can talk about that if need be, but there's no sweet spot except what it makes sense for your project. Really a range of dollar figures available. Key that we were able to waive the match, and that was the case last year and will continue to be the case. Our program does typically require a 50% match under our regular program. That still exists, but for the BIL funding, match has been waived. So all you will be asking for is federal funds, and we don't expect to see any match anywhere in your budget. It's not required. So don't give the federal government money that it doesn't need. You don't need to provide match. Our project period of approximately 4 years is what we have experienced based on the history of the program. That's again not a hard and fast number. Some very few projects finish in less than 4 years. Most are 4 and up. But just to give you a sense of that long-term projects are something that we both understand and support. And so here finally are the list of evaluation criteria that any application is reviewed against. Scope and approach, how you describe your project, how well you substantiate it, given that you're trying to address a need or solve a problem. That's described in your abstract and in your scope. Your environmental results, outputs and outcomes. We'll have a slide that digs a little bit deeper into defining what those are, but certainly it is meant to reflect what your project is hoping to achieve. Your budget detail, understanding by task. We expect to see a task budget table here of how the money will be used by task over time. The next two, the programmatic capability and expenditure of awarded grant funds, those are really ways to assess the administrative capacity of your organization. What kind of funding have you received in the past? Did you use those funds appropriately and meet your expected outcomes? So you're essentially giving examples of other funding streams that you have obtained in the past, so that we have a way to gauge your capacity. And then finally, the environmental justice and underserved communities criterion that reflects the expectations essentially that across the board for BIL funding that are the expectations that the Biden administration has under its executive order for environmental justice are incorporated into this criteria, that we meaningfully engage with environmental justice communities and seek to improve those communities. Next slide. So outputs and outcomes, it is jargon. Federal government jargon. Outputs are essentially activities and deliverables, things that are meant to show how your project moves through milestones to achieve an outcome. And the outcome is, what is the environmental result? How are you making a difference? In our regular program, we usually describe that as how are you making a difference on the ground, something that specifically changes the environment, changes a wetland, or changes water quality. For the expansion for BIL, the outcomes are a little bit broader and serve to reflect essentially changes in communities, and they can be health related or environmental in those communities, but we've been able to expand the types of outcomes that BIL funds can achieve. We do still expect that to be quantitative in some way, and we can talk about that a little bit more in the Q&A. But we're still learning also from the applications that come in, what are the ways to quantify making a change in the community. So very interested in getting feedback from new applications and new projects on that. And then we do expect for outputs and outcomes that, of course, there's a description of how you track progress. And some of that will be achieved through it, should you receive funding, the expectation that you submit quarterly reports to EPA. But that is just one way to track progress. And again, can give more examples if there's interest in the Q&A. Next slide. So very important as well that our RFA includes a map, and this is essentially a guide. It has been updated since last year, and we updated it to reflect the response that we got from several communities that they did not see themselves in our map from last year. So we have added another, basically more indicators. So this map has been generated internally at EPA using multiple environmental justice screening tools or indicator tools. So those are listed on this slide and are listed in the request for applications as well. So we want to be as transparent as possible of all the different indicators that have been layered on top of each other to reflect the communities that we feel qualify as underserved communities. But again, it's a guide, and we certainly understand that there are communities that can't be reflected geographically on a map such as this because of the construct of communities being place-based, and we have situations like people experiencing homelessness and the disenfranchisement of our Indigenous peoples and Indigenous lands that certainly also qualify as underserved communities for the purposes of applying under this grant. I'd also point out that the legend for this, which actually looks pretty small on this map, but it's a pink and purple thing. So the pink is the outline, the purple is the fill. Basically, if you're pink and purple, you're part of this map. There's no distinction. It's just a GIS thing that resulted in both pink and purple being on the map. Next slide. So again, a reminder to just help you to go stepwise as you're thinking about putting your application materials together. We did change the page limit from last year, so we now have a 15-page limit. We're still expecting that an abstract be part of what you submit in terms of providing kind of an overview of your lengthier description of your project. The project activities should be well described and in an organized fashion, and then also be reflected, those tasks be reflected in a budget table. I'll call out that there is attachment A, which is, again, I mentioned that this is a Clean Water Act focused program, and it's also authorized under a particular Clean Water Act program, which is called the National Estuary Program. And the National Estuary Program in San Francisco has a comprehensive plan, which is commonly known as the Estuary Blueprint. So there needs to be consistency of the work that is being funded under this program with the Estuary Blueprint. So we have attached attachment A, which makes it very easy for you to scan that document, the objectives and the goals, objectives and actions that are in the Estuary Blueprint, and just provide that information back to us. And it is a very comprehensive plan. So I am not anticipating that there's much that you all would like to do that isn't covered in the plan. But that is that exercise of making sure that you do that check and then provide that information back to us as part of your application. Again, focus or review the evaluation criteria related to environmental justice, but we will certainly be learning, I know, a lot from you and your applications in this sphere as well, since you are all the experts in environmental justice, and we're just happy to be able to provide funding to support you. A map is very, very helpful to understanding where you're working in the watershed in any part of the Bay, and sometimes you have a regional approach as opposed to working in a smaller community. Either is fine. It's just providing kind of that geographic scope through a map can be very helpful to us as we learn about your project. And then, of course, it's always helpful if your work is working in partnership with others, that those partners provide their support through letters of support, so that you and we then understand that the documentation of how they are participating in your project. The letters of support are optional. They're certainly not required as part of the application, but obviously can be very instructive as we review the project activities. Next slide. This is what it looks like to land on grants.gov under the correct grant opportunity number. So we just wanted to give you an idea, if you haven't ever opened up grants.gov, what it should look like in terms of the menu and the tabs. But this is where you will find yourself, and you'll see the buttons where you will essentially you'll have to register. And then start to upload materials, and then eventually get to hit that apply button. Next slide. So plenty to say on our forms. So this is the first of two forms that we'll just cover briefly, and we can certainly talk about it more. So 424A, the first form that you'll actually fill out is the 424. That is lots of boxes of basically organizational information and requests for funding. And then you start into the 424A, which is actually several pages of budget information. We wanted to make it abundantly clear how to try to fill this form out correctly. It should be easier than it is. So apologies for that, but we are stuck with forms that were created many years ago. They just don't update forms very frequently. So there are lots of places that reflect the needs of other programs that you don't need to fill out. So for this first table, the top, you really need to fill out one row. And it's filled in here as we would expect to see it from you. So describing what program you're asking for funding from. So this is the BIL, San Francisco Bay WQIF. Our CFDA, which also has recently changed its name, but on the form it'll say CFDA. That number is 66.126. And then the amount you're applying for. And again, there's no match required. So that's the only number that we expect to see on this line, which is the amount of federal funds that you're requesting. And since there's no match, the total should be the same as what you're requesting. The next table down on this page of tables, asks you to then break out that budget, that amount of money that you're requesting, by budget categories. There are very specific definitions for these category types. Personnel, thankfully, that is pretty self-evident. It's the staff time that your organization wants to use the federal funds for. We haven't included a fringe amount there, but you certainly can. Travel is an eligible expense. Equipment is usually a very particular thing. But I will say things like computers are not considered equipment. There's a $50K threshold for an equipment, what qualifies as equipment. So it may be like a water quality sonde that can talk to Mars, you know, something that's like really, really special. That's the equipment category. Things like supplies are certainly things like paper and computer equipment. A lot of things qualify under supplies that you might have thought would be equipment, but it's not. They're supplies. And then the key difference between contractual and construction and other, that we'll probably spend a lot of time clarifying that. And we do have another slide that specifically talks about the difference between things that are contracts and things that are subawards. So I'll wait till that slide. But just to say, for the difference between construction, and that is a legacy of an old form, we actually never expect to see any costs, any numbers. So your form will not have this strike through on it, but we've added the strike through to kind of message that construction activities are not part of our grant program. They are, at least they can be, what if you want to do it, that's an activity that is definitely eligible for funding, but those costs should be reflected in contractual, because usually when you're doing construction, you're putting that into a contract, someone who is under contract with you to do that construction. So that is where the amount of money should show up in your budget under contractual. I'll stop there on this slide. Let's go to the next slide. I think it's the next one's the next one is making the distinction between subawards and contracts. And it's very likely that you will have some of both in the projects. Most projects have some combination of subawards and contracts. Subawards in your budget, which was on the previous slide, is this row H, the other. And those are any funding that you hope to put into place. You may call it a contract, but we don't call it a contract because it's with someone who is integral to the success of your project. So your partners, essentially your partners. Those are all subawards, and all of these are eligible applicants, eligible entities as subawardees. For contracts, the key distinction is that the activity itself qualifies as really providing a service. And there are lots of entities that can provide that service. Even if you've worked with them for a long time and you have a special relationship with them, if there are other entities that can provide that service, whether it be facilitation, a project plan, an engineering design, actual construction, those are things that we require some competitive bidding for. And so, those are the federal requirements for contracts, that a service be competitively bid. And I'm sure we can talk about that more too, but that's the essential distinction, and that thus fall into the separate budget categories, row H or row F on that previous budget table. Next slide. So one other form that we were just going to touch on, because there have been recent changes, is this not very well described title, Form 4704. It is essentially the documentation that every organization needs to provide to the federal government to help the federal government ensure that its funds are meeting their civil rights obligations. And I'm sure for many of you, you have filled this form out prior in other years. The change is that the forms are being reviewed with more scrutiny based on policy changes as of this year in 2023. It really impacts impacts at time of award. So please fill it out to the best of your knowledge with every box checked, either yes or no. If there is a box that's checked no, it will trigger this extra review and extra negotiation with our Office of Legal Counsel, essentially. So it's just to make you aware that that could happen not during your application phase, but later in the award phase. And again, we can go over the form if there are specific questions. There's no filling it out wrong, especially in the application phase, but just letting folks know that if you filled it out in the past one way, and it was past review prior, it may not pass this year, essentially because any box that's checked no indicates that we may have a vulnerability related to civil rights obligations. And so the negotiation is how to get to yes in terms of all of the items that are being checked on here. Next slide. Our website, I really hope folks have already visited it. We have an ever-growing amount of information, also always open to feedback for making it easier to navigate, or put things that you expect to find on it that you have trouble finding. But we have been improving it, so we're actually really proud of the amount of information that you can find here. We have a fact sheet for the first time this year, thanks to our amazing growing San Francisco Bay team, tips sheet, frequently asked questions, which again, we have been logging since 2008, so I can't wait to hear questions that it's like a challenge, throwing down the gauntlet. I want to hear a question I haven't ever been asked before, just so we can get it back onto the frequently asked questions. But it is a really good place to start if you have questions, to check frequently asked questions. It's organized by topic and it's chock full of information. Next slide. This is our process. You may very well be aware our deadline for applications for BIL is June 29th. We will do a quick threshold eligibility for all applications that come in to ensure that key must-haves have been met, and that's what moves on to the full review of any application. That usually is no problem. We almost never have to not pass anyone through threshold eligibility, but it is part of our process. We will take approximately 2 months to score and rank proposals. So we will be letting folks know, applicants know, by late August of their funding status. We will then ask for more of these forms, of course. So the full application package probably coming from our new grantees in September, with projects probably starting close to November. Next slide. We definitely want to be here for you. So we are offering additional options for interacting with us, all members of our team. We have set aside time and dates, and we will also be posting this, I think it is actually already on our website. So you can find these dates. We will be using the same invite. It'll be on Teams platform. We will be there. We will be there to answer any questions that you have. Given that June will essentially start to be crunch time, you'll start wanting to really get down into the details of how to put together your budget and make sure you have all the forms and make sure you can navigate our platforms. So we will be there with you and available to answer any questions you have in June. Yes, and then a reminder again that we're doing this really all to make sure that you are ready for grants.gov, because that's where all the application materials have to be submitted to. Next slide. These are resources that are also available on our website, but just want to make them easy for you to find because they can help you also. Maybe you're working on it at 7 p.m. instead of regular hours, so you can't reach us. These are other resources that may help you at all hours of the day and night. Next slide. This is us. This is our team, myself, and all of our contact information. And I will highlight also that grants.gov has a very helpful help desk. So that 1-800 number is something else that you should have at the ready for answering any questions that are actually when you're on the platform where we don't have access. So they will be your go-to if you're actually having electronic or registration issues on grants.gov. And I think that's the last slide. It is time for questions. Thanks so much, and I think we can stop the recording now.